Most marketing budgets don't fail because they're too small, they actually fail because they're allocated badly. Over the last 12 years at Exposure Ninja, we've worked with thousands of companies, from tiny startups spending a few $1,000s per month to massive multi-billion-dollar global brands. And the pattern we've noticed is always the same. The brands that are winning aren't necessarily the ones that are spending the most. It's the ones that are smartest about where they allocate that budget. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 5-step framework that we use with our clients to allocate their budget for the maximum return on investment in 2026. We'll cover how to figure out what's actually working, where to concentrate your spend, how much budget to allocate for experimentation, and that's more important than ever, and how to make sure that your budget stays effective as things change, because things always change. But first, how much should you actually spend on your marketing? Well, some companies spend big. In 2018, for example, Salesforce spent 46% of its revenue on sales and marketing, and that was $4.8 billion. Well, if that sounds crazy, in 2022, Asana spent 78% of their total revenue on sales and marketing. Now, obviously, these are companies with very aggressive growth strategies and cash to burn. The average marketing spend is closer to 7.5% to 8% of total revenue. And this has actually dropped a bit over recent years, although it does seem to have stabilized around 7.7%. Of course, this also depends on whether you're B2B, B2C, the industry that you're in, whether you're selling products and services. The industry that you're in obviously has quite a big impact on total marketing spend because in some spaces it's a lot more competitive, so you have to spend more of your revenue. In other spaces, it's a little bit more sleepy, so you can get away with spending a bit less. But here's what we've seen over thousands of campaigns. How much you spend actually matters far less than where you allocate it. Particularly in the early days of Exposure Ninja, we got known for working with clients on tiny budgets and blowing competitors out of the water that were spending 5, 10, 100 times as much. That's become a lot more difficult to do today, but it's still very possible. We still have clients that are spending relatively modest amounts compared to their competitors and outperforming them because we're choosing where to spend that money and getting much better leverage than their competitors that are flying a little bit more blind and just seeing what happens. Which brings us nicely to the 5-step framework, set your goals, because without this, nothing else happens. Now, we're not going to spend loads of time here because setting goals is pretty obvious, but the reason we like to talk about this when we're talking about budget allocation is it's really nice to have a clear business outcome related goal to work back from. Typically at Exposure Ninja, we love working to revenue goals because they're very clear, everybody understands them, and they are very much tied to business outcomes. But whether it's revenue or something else like lead volume, new customer sign-ups, whatever, it's nice to have one main target goal. We then set supporting goals underneath this. We know that if we hit the supporting goals, that main goal is going to be achieved. So examples of supporting goals might be conversions, it might be leads, it might be number of sales, it might be website traffic, it might be traffic from a particular channel, it might be improving conversion rates. Let me give an example to show you what this looks like in practice. So we've got a finance client of ours that came to us saying they wanted to grow their monthly revenue 25%. So that's our main primary goal that we're after. So we set 3 supporting goals underneath this to make that happen. Number 1, increase the number of conversions generated by the website. Number 2, increase the amount of traffic from organic search. And number 3, increase the AI referral traffic. Now, the AI referral traffic was relatively small when we started, 20 visits per month. We wanted to increase this to 150. Now, this is still a relatively small amount of traffic, so why did this become a supporting goal? Well, the reason for that, and we'll come back to this in a bit, is because we could see the performance of that traffic was really high. So if we could increase the amount of traffic coming from AI, even though 150 visits a month doesn't sound like a lot, the quality of that traffic and the value of each of those visitors was so high, we knew that the value of that traffic would significantly contribute to this 25% monthly revenue increase. Now, the reason that this matters isn't just accountability. It's because only by tracking how you're doing against your supporting goals and your main goal, you can see that your budget allocation is working or not. Without that evidence of how you're tracking against your goals, you can't make the decisions that we're going to make in the following steps. Okay, step 2 is where things start to get interesting because that's where most businesses start to realize that they've been investing their budget in areas that aren't really working. Step 2 is to audit what's working. Before you allocate another pound or dollar in your marketing, we need to look at the last 6 to 12 months traffic and see exactly what's been going on. This is about data, not what feels like it's working, what's actually working. Now, when we're looking at digital channels, we're looking at things like the lifetime value of each customer that has come in from that channel, the customer acquisition cost, so how much it's costing to get each customer from that channel. If you're generating leads and you have a sales team, what that lead to sale conversion rate looks like, i.e. how qualified are the leads coming from this channel. And of course, the lead or sales volumes. Now, one common mistake that brands and marketing departments can make here is they might have a really high volume channel that's driving loads of traffic and is driving a lot of their leads and sales. But actually, when you look at the performance and the quality of those leads, it's not that high. There might be another much smaller channel, but actually the quality is so much higher. And if that smaller channel was scaled up, it would be transformational for the business. So that's why it's important not to just look at the revenue generated by each channel, but look at some of these underlying metrics like customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, and conversion rate. We want to prioritize channels that, of course, have good volume. If you've got a channel that's driving a huge amount of volume for your business, you're going to want to prioritize that channel. But look beyond that to the ones where lifetime value is strong, customer acquisition cost is very acceptable, maybe the conversion rate is really high. Let me give an example here for one of our smaller clients, and this is actually quite a common pattern that we notice across businesses of all size. They came to us because they wanted to invest in AI search optimization. This wasn't an area that was really big in their marketing mix. They weren't driving much traffic from it, but they could see that their customers were going to be using tools like ChatGPT. Now, whilst the traffic from AI tools like ChatGPT at the moment is relatively low, they're generating around $66,000 of revenue from this channel across a really tiny number of visitors because the conversion rate of that traffic is so high. Now, if they looked at volume alone, they'd have said, well, 66,000 of revenue is neither here nor there. But actually, if you look at the quality and the number of people that are providing that 66,000, you'd say, well, actually, if we could scale this, that is huge for the business. Therefore, the profitability of that channel is really high, and it then becomes a priority moving forward. And by the way, if you want some help auditing your current channels, this is one of the things that the team at Exposure Ninja can help you with. We typically do this process with people before they become a client because it helps us to work out where we can add the most value. All you need to do is request a free digital marketing review from the team if you're interested in working with us on this. You can just head over to exposureninja.com/review. You'll have to fill out a short questionnaire to tell us a bit about your business. One of the team will typically give you a call to ask you any follow-up questions, and will then do a bit of an initial audit for you on the performance of your different traffic channels. We'll look at things like the value of each different traffic channel, where your competitors are putting the most attention, and what your marketing mix could look like over the next 6 or 12 months to increase the leads and sales to the volume that you're targeting. This service is free, but not everybody is eligible, so you do need to apply for it over at exposureninja.com/review. So once you've audited, you'll know what's working, but in step 3, we actually put that to use, and we follow a rule that sounds really simple, but almost nobody is following. Step 3 is to allocate 80% of your marketing budget to the 2 to 4 priority channels. This is the single biggest mistake that we see businesses making. They have a decent marketing budget, but they're splitting it across 8, 10, 12, 14 different channels. There are so many plates spinning, each with their own set of goals, their own priorities. It's almost impossible for marketing leadership to compare the performance of each channel, and it's very difficult for the teams working on those channels to get good enough results. What we usually do is, based on the audit, we'll prioritize the 2 to 4 channels that the data shows are performing best and put 80% of the budget and resources behind those. Then we split that 80% between those different channels based on their performance. It's better to do a few channels really well than loads of channels poorly. And as you'll have seen from our marketing teardowns that we've done of even massive multi-billion-dollar global brands, not everybody is killing it on every channel. It might look like they are, but in terms of driving business results, there is usually a few core channels that are delivering the most return. So let me give you an example based on one of our current clients. Now, their total marketing budget is around $100,000 a month, but that doesn't really matter. What we're looking at is the split between the different channels here. We've got 80% of that marketing budget focused on the 4 core channels. Those are SEO, where they're spending about $15,000 per month. This is their long-term growth lever. This is high-quality organic traffic that also gives them really good opportunity to be visible in AI search moving forward. This also allows them to eventually reduce their dependence on paid channels. And if there's one thing about running marketing in paid channels, The rule is everybody who's spending a lot of money on Google Ads wants to reduce that spend, because when they've got organic visibility, that visibility can last for months or years, whereas a paid spend, of course, as soon as you turn it off, that visibility disappears. Now, I don't necessarily agree with removing as much budget as possible from paid channels. My perspective is if it's working, if it's providing the ROI that you need, then you continue doing that. But there's absolutely nothing against building that organic visibility underneath to reduce your reliance on constantly having to run that sort of paid volume. So 15K on organic search, then 25 to 35K on Google Ads. This has historically been their workhorse channel. This is where they focus on the very bottom of funnel, highest commercial intent keywords. We know from the tracking this produces the highest volume of good quality sales qualified leads, so it is really their top priority. We then work with them to flex this budget up and down depending on the performance, seasonality, the quality of the leads coming through, and their capacity inside the business. Then they have a $3,000 a month Meta ad spend. Now, if this sounds like a really tiny amount compared to the Google ad spend, yeah, it is, but we use this budget quite surgically. We use it mainly for retargeting. So people who've been on the website or been in their email list, for example, but haven't made the decision to buy yet. So two areas that we'll focus on: real top of the funnel stuff, people who've been looking around on the website, maybe haven't committed, haven't signed up for anything, haven't got themselves on the email list. We'll retarget them to get them back on the site and do that stuff. The other group that we'll target is people towards the bottom of the funnel where we're trying to get them to make that purchase, but they're not quite there yet. We'll follow them around on Facebook and Instagram and just bump them over the line by showing relevant ads at the right times. We also know that this channel drives branded search demand as well. So if we run those ads, we see an increase in the number of branded searches on organic traffic. So although it's a relatively small amount, because we're focusing it quite tightly, it's still worth keeping in this priority section. Then there's $4,600 a month on email marketing. This is about investing in building out the nurture sequences to get people who signed up for an email list or who've inquired to become a customer and then a regular customer. So notice that that's 4 channels, not 12. And each one has a really clear job to do. We're not doing them because, oh, someone said we should do this channel, or, oh, this thing was trending the other day. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's 80% of the marketing budget. Where does the other 20% go? Well, that's step 4. And in 2026, this might actually be the most important step of all. Step 4 is allocating 20% of your marketing budget to experimentation. Our goal here is to reduce future risk and avoiding over-reliance on channels that might be disrupted. Now in 2026, this experimentation is more important than ever, because there is so much change going on in digital marketing. We've got organic search, where the increase in zero-click searches and presence of AI overviews, meaning that people don't necessarily click through on websites as frequently. We've got AI search becoming a more established part of the customer journey. And we've got agentic AI, where AI agents are visiting your website, doing the research, and maybe even buying products on behalf of their human masters. So our recommendation is to allocate 20% of your marketing budget to new channels or experimental approaches. This might be things like AI search optimization. It might be new content formats like video and podcasts. It might be new paid formats or placements. It might be influencer and creator partnerships. But the point here is to limit the number of experiments that you're carrying out and be conscious about them so that you can allocate enough budget and resource to make sure that they produce a clear result. There's nothing worse than just throwing $1,000 at something, testing it for a week or 2 weeks or a month, saying it doesn't work. Right, okay, that's that channel in the bin forever then. Every experiment should have a defined goal, a fixed period, and a clear decision point to either scale, improve, or stop. So let me give an example. One of the clients that came to us, which I'm not going to name, but huge multi-billion-dollar global brand, you would know them. They came to us and they didn't really have a plan to invest in AI search. We did a bit of an audit of their overall marketing and the whole marketing landscape, and we identified that actually they were really vulnerable to a rise in popularity for AI search. So people going to ChatGPT to do their research, people going on Google. The reason that they were very vulnerable is they had a lot of definition content on their website. This was content talking about the particular terms, in this case ingredients, in their products. And we could see that traffic to these ingredient type pages was going to reduce over time. So what we had to do is insulate them from this risk, but also look at whether this was an opportunity to generate more sales. So we ran an AI search audit which identified content gaps, so things that we could cover on the website which would give more detail on these topics than the AI overviews, for example, were giving. But we also identified follow-up searches that people were going to make. So let's say they're researching about a particular ingredient. What would be the next search? Because actually that's the one that's most likely to lead to a purchase. Once we identified what those searches were, we were able to produce content around those topics and increase the amount of traffic, and very qualified traffic, coming through to the site for people who are ready to make a purchase. Once we had the data from that experiment, this was no longer, oh, this is just a quick test to see what happens. It was, okay, there's enough mileage here, there's enough potential, and the trajectory is clear that we need to prioritize this as one of the core 4 or 5 main channels. Now, your budget isn't a set and forget decision. Step 5 is about reviewing progress and reallocating as necessary. We typically review things on a monthly and quarterly basis. That's because the market changes, your budget changes, and the allocation needs to respond to all of that. So what are we looking at monthly? We're looking at channel performance. Is traffic and quality of traffic from that channel increasing or decreasing? We're looking at customer acquisition costs, lifetime value. Like, what's the quality of the leads or sales that are coming through? We're also looking at sudden drops or spikes in volume. Now, this monthly analysis doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be making changes to budget allocation monthly, but it does inform us the overall shape and direction. In our quarterly reviews, we're looking at the performance of the core channels and the results of our experiments. And at this point, we are making budget allocation decisions. So we won't be afraid to change budget allocation on a quarterly basis based on what we're seeing here. And of course, sometimes budget changes happen to you. They happen because of some other thing that's going on in the business, internal reorganizations. For example, we've had clients that have been acquired, clients that have changed the structure of their marketing teams, brought in more people, and a lot of the time these decisions have nothing to do with performance. So your budget allocation needs to be able to adapt to stuff like this. I'll give an example. One of our clients came to us in 2023, having had horrendous experience with agencies previously. They wanted a clear strategy and reliable lead generation. That's all they wanted. Is that too much to ask? Well, it turns out no, it's not too much to ask. We smashed their lead target in the first year, proving that the strategy, the channel mix, and the budget allocation was in a really good place. But in 2024, they had some significant internal changes and some stuff around investment that meant that they had to really cut back their marketing budget. Their lead target went from 600 leads to 24 leads, which shows you how much that marketing budget was affected. So what did we do? Well, instead of abandoning the strategy and starting from scratch, we chose to focus on the very small number of marketing channels that were providing the absolute peak return on investment. Yes, this meant that we had to cut a lot of experimentation budget. Yes, it even meant that we had to reduce some of the core channels. But our focus at that point wasn't huge, massive growth. It was to prevent a loss of momentum and to keep as many leads as possible coming through. Now, the good news is that we were able to overachieve on the lead target despite the cuts. But the point is that sometimes these budget decisions happen outside of the marketing leader's control, and your budget allocation and your strategy needs to be able to flex up and down accordingly. So that's the 5 steps. Clear specific goals, audit what's working, focus 80% of your budget in the core channels that you know are performing well, 20% for experimentation, and continue to review throughout the year as things change. So what if you get challenged internally on your budget? Because from time to time, everybody does. Well, the point of running through a process like this is that you can show your workings. You can show that you did your initial analysis to work out where to focus. You can show how you prioritized each channel based on the results and the potential and trajectory of that channel. You can show what you allocated to the experimentation. And if people throw ideas at you, and I say this as an ideas throwy type person, you can say, great, that looks really good. Let me review it to see if it meets our criteria for our 20% experimentation budget in the next quarter. If you can explain your budget allocation choices in under 5 minutes using that framework, you're in a really good position. Now, one of the big questions that marketers are asking is, what's going on with SEO in 2026? Well, in this video, we explore exactly what's going on in SEO in 2026 and look at whether it's time to pivot away from SEO into other areas like AI search optimization. I hope you've enjoyed this video and see you next time.